The first full week of the 2011 legislative session is in the books, and members from both parties say the budget is the #1 priority for both chambers. To get the ball rolling, the Senate has a bill on the table that would give temporary budget cutting capabilities to the governor. It's all coming up next.
Quality public television is made possible through the financial contributions of viewers like you, who invite you to join them in supporting UNC-TV.
Hello and welcome to the North Carolina Now Legislative Week in Review. I'm Jeff Smith. Week 2 of the General Assembly 2011 session brings more debate over how to chip away at the projected budget shortfall facing lawmakers. There's also a move by House and Senate Republicans to remove the cap on charter schools in the state. But first, House members discuss a bill that will challenge the federal health care law. Wednesday's floor debate over House Bill 2 was heated at times, with conversation going back and forth between Republicans and Democrats. Many House Democrats argued that the bill was unnecessary and even unconstitutional. They were even referring to a letter from Attorney General Roy Cooper saying he did not think North Carolina should be involved in the lawsuit against the federal government. Joining me now is Pricey Harrison. Thank you so much for being here. Talk about what the Democrats disliked about this bill.
Well, I think we feel pretty strongly that the electorate sent us here to Raleigh to focus on jobs and the economy and closing the budget gap. And this seems to be a very partisan, politically driven distraction, this debate on health care reform. It's going to require some expenditures by the Attorney General's office that we're not sure we even have. The Attorney General's already come out and said it doesn't make any sense for North Carolina to join the lawsuit. And the substance of the lawsuit really, the basis of the lawsuit really has no merit. And I think the public out there, while there are polls that show that there's strong support for various aspects of healthcare reform, although there is, wavering support on the mandate piece. But the mandate piece is what makes possible the shared risk that makes possible not denying coverage for pre-existing conditions, letting your children stay on your policy, all the popular aspects of healthcare reform.
Republicans talked about how other states were already on this lawsuit that's going on. Do you feel that North Carolina should be part of that, and do you think that those other states even have merit?
Well, I haven't read the opinions, but 12 cases has been dismissed in federal district court. 2 have upheld the law, and then there are these 2 others in Virginia and Florida that have ruled against health care reform. And I don't know that it makes any sense for North Carolina to jump on board. The suits are going to end up in the Supreme Court, and they're going to decide, and it just is going to be an expenditure of resources at the Attorney General's office that we can't really afford at this point.
Do you feel this is a rushed job?
Well, there is all that. Procedurally, we were really upset. There was no chance for public input. We had one hearing in judiciary and then straight to the floor. The Attorney General's office didn't even have the opportunity to comment. And so I feel like this really it seemed very politically driven, and it's just unfortunate because there's a lot of important issues we need to focus on, and this isn't one of them.
Wednesday on the House floor, plenty of discussion was had. Do you feel that people were able to get their opinion out and their feelings out, at least on the floor?
Oh, that was fair debate. Speaker Tillis did a great job allowing everyone to speak who needed to, and I think there was a good 3.5 hours of debate on the House floor. Just unfortunately, we didn't have the input from the experts and the advocates who understand the implementation aspect of this, the fact that the doctors are for it, how hospitals were impacted, all the various permutations of this lawsuit potentiality. It's just that we didn't get any insight on that because we needed the public input.
Do you feel Wednesday's debate, the common ground that was available for everybody to have a chance to speak, is that going to be what we're going to look for this session? Is going to be that ability? Do you think that's a good start at least?
Well, I hope so. I think Speaker Tillis has indicated that he'd like to have fair and open debate, and I think that's the way the chamber should operate. I think Speaker Hackney did a very good job of that in the past, his past 2 bienniums as Speaker, and I think that's the way to do it. I just think, unfortunately, the committee is where you have the deliberation, and we just didn't have the proper deliberation at that level.
One of the things that's happened recently is less committees, less restructuring of the committees, basically. Do you feel that that's part of the problem for this, or do you think that that's not an issue at all?
Well, I'm not sure. I think there probably some achieved efficiencies by consolidating the committees, and that probably makes sense. I think that with Speaker Hackney's tenure, I think he felt like if you had serial referrals that went to various committees, like maybe the Health Committee or the Insurance Committee, might have given it a little bit of a different perspective on it. I think that having the Committee of the Whole of the Judiciary was helpful because that got all the subcommittees' input, but I think having other eyes would have been helpful for this particular debate.
Thanks so much for being on here.
Well, I appreciate your having me.
House Republicans also were heavily arguing for their bill, which after 3.5 hours of debate passed the House. To discuss what the bill does is House Majority Leader Paul Skip-Stam. Well, Representative, talking about the health care bill, what exactly was the reason for doing this bill?
The bill does two things. First, it establishes that as a matter of state policy that the government is not going to order people to obtain any particular medical care or to buy any particular health insurance, and that they can pay directly for medical services themselves. That's one thing it does. The second thing is to direct the Attorney General to either bring a lawsuit or, if he prefers, join one of the other 28 states in seeking a declaration that the individual mandate of the federal health bill is unconstitutional.
Now, the Democrats were saying that this is a waste of time, basically. Do you feel that this is a waste of time?
Well, potentially it's a matter of billions and billions of dollars, so obviously I don't think it's a waste of time. Employers are reluctant to hire because they are uncertain about what the health insurance rules would be for new workers, and we need to do our part to settle that uncertainty. And if the thing finally goes into effect in 2014, the projections are that it will cost our state budget hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars, if not billions.
What type of communication has gone across the chambers, the Senate, with their bill that they introduced as well this week? What type of communication is going on?
Well, we did have an agreement with the Senate leadership that the House bill would proceed and that they would receive that. I haven't read the Senate bill. Sorry, just haven't had time.
It's still new, and like
Right.
you said, the House is going to take it over. What type of motivation, the momentum that's gone into this with the other states that have filed already, what do you think the momentum's like on this right now?
Well, 26 states won a big victory Monday afternoon when a federal district judge said the entire federal law was unconstitutional, and we won a victory a month or so ago when the district court for part of Virginia declared the individual mandate to be unconstitutional. So we have a lot of momentum, and I think people are gradually waking up to the fact that this is just an unprecedented usurpation of government authority for the federal government to order people to buy something.
A lot of amendments were added, or a couple of amendments were added yesterday on the floor, or on Wednesday on the floor, excuse me.
Right.
And what did those really do? And some of them were rejected as well that were brought up by some of the Democrats, including
Well, the amendments that were adopted were just including some common sense exceptions. We already had 7 or 8 exceptions, like if you're in a custody fight or a support fight about your children, you can be ordered to pay for health insurance for that child. That just makes sense. And the ones accepted were like that. We weren't trying to change those kind of rules. The amendments that were rejected were one that was just designed to gut the bill by making it ineffective. And the second one would have only accomplished the first purpose, but would not have had the Attorney General state our case to the federal courts. The Attorney General, by our Constitution, is the lawyer for the state of North Carolina. He's not the lawyer for himself or for the governor, but for the state as a whole. And if this bill becomes law, it is the law, and by Constitution, it's up to the Attorney General to carry it out.
Thank you, Representative Stam. On the other side of the General Assembly, the Senate is working on a bill that would give the governor a head start on closing the gap in the upcoming budget year. Senate Bill 13 would give temporary authority to Governor Perdue to make up at least $400 million in cuts across state government. The governor already has the power to request cuts from some areas of state government, but this legislation would allow her to have the legal authority to request cuts from all agencies and departments. It would give the governor power to hold back spending in state agencies she doesn't control, including the Department of Public Instruction, the UNC system, and the Department of Agriculture.
In discussions between our appropriations people and the governor's budget people, that $400 million is the number that that we've settled on as far as the target for those reversions. Now, I suspect that you'll see the percentages, differing from department to department, but the important thing at this point, as far as the bill is concerned, is that overall target of $400 million.
The bill passed second reading on Thursday in the Senate. Senator Stevens objected to the third reading so that some technical issues could be corrected before final reading on Monday. This bill would only give these powers to the governor through the end of the 2010-2011 fiscal year. And we should also note that 45% of UNC-TV's funding is appropriated by the General Assembly. Also in the Senate this week, on Wednesday, the Senate Education Committee discussed Senate Bill 8, which would remove the current cap on the number of charter schools throughout the state. Removing the cap was one of the major pieces of legislation that the new Republican majority listed as a must-do for this session.
We're going to move very deliberately on this legislation. It's extremely important for the people of the state. We're not going to do anything in a rush manner. We'll get input from lots of parties of all perspectives. As you notice, there's no votes taken today. There might be one as early as next week, but that's the earliest it would be, a week from today. So there's plenty of opportunity for dialogue and discussion on this very important issue. So no, nothing's going to be rushed. It is a priority, and so you see it coming up early in the session. We hope to move the bill very soon, but not in a rush manner, in a very deliberate manner.
Members of the committee discussed issues they had with the bill and questioned how the increase in charter schools would affect the state's public schools.
I know in my county we're closing about 7 or 8 schools, soon to be surplus properties. Does this address the fact that the LEA will have the opportunity to assist a charter school, either an existing and or a future charter school, to potentially purchase or lease this surplus property so that we can reduce some of the cost?
These are public charter schools, and what I do not want to do is create a dual system of the public schools and then the charter schools.
When the senators finished their discussion, a few members of the audience had a chance to speak, including this mother of 2 from the Charlotte area who has been on a waiting list for her daughter to attend a charter middle school.
I started applying early because I was hoping that by the time she reached middle school, an opening would come available for her, but that's not the case. So that has left me in dismay, so to speak, and wondering what am I going to do next for my child.
Our organization believes that the elimination of the cap will be an adequate response for such issues, especially when you look at the fact that 3 of the states that border North Carolina, Georgia, South Carolina, Virginia, has also eliminated the cap on charter schools.
Now, the opposition to the bill did not argue the removal of the cap or even the existence of charter schools. Instead, they raised concerns with certain aspects of the proposed legislation.
From a governance point of view, what we want to encourage is having the State Board have an advisory council. We've had it in law before that they could do it. What we strongly recommend is following the format that you've used in other legislation that provides commissions that say something more about the composition of those that are going to be there, make sure there are people who are qualified and interested in the issue, have term limits, and set what that commission's going to do.
We want to make sure that if and when charter schools are expanded in this state, which we do not oppose, that all children in this state have an opportunity to make that choice.
No vote was taken on the bill, and discussions will continue next week before a final draft goes to the Senate floor.
I think you've noticed in the last few weeks, months, that several groups who had opposed the expansion of charter schools have said, well, maybe, but let's talk about the how. And so open that dialogue will move us ahead. It should. I'm encouraged that people have backed off of that position and now willing to sit down and figure out how we can make this happen.
During Senate Pro Tem Phil Berger's weekly press conference on Tuesday, the senator talked about the low priority of privatizing the state ABC system.
It's a long-term issue. There really is, as I understand it, no short-term fiscal benefit to dealing with it, and right now, in many respects, we're trying to concentrate on those things that deal with the current fiscal year's budget and trying to make sure that we make decisions about next year's budget. And then as we move along, I think we'll start looking at those sorts of things.
We're joined now by Charles Thomas, Chief of Staff for Speaker Tillis's office. Talk about what we're doing now with the changes in the committee meetings this year.
Well, first, the speaker, before he was even elected speaker, wanted to analyze where we could pick up some operational efficiencies. And it had been stated by someone that the North Carolina House, in comparison to all of the other chambers, like it in the United States, had more committees than any other like body. So did an analysis, I guess sort of a bad name but good result, the Committee on Committees. They did some good work, and they shrank the number of total committees by about a third. There are still some other committees that are written in the statute that aren't part of what we, address when the rules are passed, that will also get some analysis, from a functionality standpoint. But we've seen thus far, Jerry Cohen reported out in an email yesterday that bill drafting requests are down 32%. So perhaps that's a function of another thing that we've done, which is the 10 bill limit for public bills. Members can still file all the local bills, that they'd like, and the agency bills and the study bills aren't impacted by that. So if that's the case, and we continue on that track, we should be able to see in the next few months a monetary savings as a result of that.
Yeah, we're not looking at, well, you are looking at pinching pennies as much as possible. We're not looking at millions of dollars of savings here, but
no, that's right.
Any kind of savings has to be good.
Right, and I think that those models of and that thought process to go through, as far as where efficiencies can be picked up, is going to be beneficial as the members move forward with the very heavy task of balancing that budget. So.
Now, one thing, you're a former House representative member as well. Lots of meetings you had to go to during that time. How
Right.
much of a challenge is it to time-wise for a representative here, and how much will this help save the current members that are in service?
Well, I think, historically, if you'll talk to folks, particularly that have been around here a long time, not much happens in the first month of session. The organizational process is still ongoing. Members are still having their offices assigned. The seat assignments on the floor are still temporary. Committee assignments, get worked out over time. Within 5 business days, the committees have been announced, organized, been through a drop add period where somewhere on the order of 40 changes were made to help accommodate members' requests. We utilized inmate labor to help facilitate the office moves, so we did those in basically 48 hours as opposed to over the course of a week or more time. And that should translate into more productive work days at the front end, which would mean fewer work days at the back end, and that's roughly $50,000 a day.
Now, how much of it is this permanent? I mean, or is it, if you see the need that you need to add more committees back in, is that something that's available as well?
Sure. The committee structure could be altered if the need be, and I suspect that the Speaker and the members will discuss the possibility of other select committees, and then also, again, look at the possibility of reorganizing, some of the committees that exist, by statute.
Are there other things out there that are being talked about for consolidation and improvement for saving money? I know computers, laptops have been one thing that's been talked about for years here for the members to be able to use and cut down on some of the paperwork. Is that
Yes.
something that's being considered as well?
It is, and in fact, both on the information technology piece is being examined, and then just the basic, Six Sigma, approach to processes. And in fact, the Speaker has discussed that very thing with some folks over at NC State to try and look to see where else operational efficiencies can be brought in. Because if the General Assembly and the way that it operates can be more efficient, put in place more best practices, hopefully as the members go about their hard task, they can use that as a benchmark in their own experience here as to how perhaps other departments within the state should be looked at.
Yeah, it's kind of a trickle-down effect. Less meetings up top means hopefully less meetings down the way. Same for less paperwork down the way.
Nobody likes to go to a meeting to plan the next meeting. So, right.
Thank you so much for joining us here today.
Thank you.
Well, Gary Robertson, Associated Press, thanks for being with us again this year and today. Sure. Lots of stuff happening early on this year.
It's unusual.
Very unusual. talk about, first of all, the big one that's been happening in the Senate, the Balanced Budget Act.
Well, we were talking earlier that the Balanced Budget Act, it's the Balanced Budget Act of 2011. It's more really the Balanced Budget Act for 2012, because right now, in theory, our budget is balanced. We're bringing in enough revenues to cover expenses, but Republicans are concerned that this $3.7 billion projected shortfall for next year is going to be too large to handle in 1 year. So that what they're trying to do is generate some carryover, and they've asked Governor Perdue to find $400 million in savings. They're also going to take about $140 million from various pots of money throughout state government, including some of the tobacco trust funds. And so it's been interesting to see that kind of morph through the week, where it went to the Senate floor and Republicans passed it on generally a party line vote.
It's almost like would you rather have it hurt now or hurt later when it comes to this money? It's got to come from somewhere eventually. They're just trying to, I guess, get a head start, like you said.
Yeah, I think that's what they said on the floor. Like Senator Richard Stevens, who is one of the primary sponsors, one of the Senate budget writers now, he says, if we do this now, it will make the pain a little less painful for the next budget cycle. But we hear Democrats who are particularly concerned, not necessarily about the cutting, but more about what pots of money they chose. In particular, the Golden Leaf Foundation, which gets half of the tobacco settlement money, as well as two key economic incentives programs that Governor Perdue uses a lot. And it came to some tough words in committee and in the Senate chamber this week.
And do you feel this is a way for the Senate Republicans to say, we want to make cuts, but we don't want it to be our pen that's making those cuts. We want to make sure Governor Perdue has this ability to make these choices, so it's on her dime, maybe?
Well, I think I'm sure there's some discussion about that. I know that there are some people out there who feel like it's the legislature who appropriates, and they should be the ones that should be cutting as well. But I think there's a view out there among some that if you let the chief executive, meaning Governor Perdue, who runs essentially state government as the budget director, she may know best, or her underlings may know best, where to find the cuts that will hurt the least or cause the greatest disruption to services.
Staying in the Senate now, let's move over to the other big topic that Republicans said they wanted to talk about this year was the charter school cap. It's moving along nicely for the Republicans to go through the system for the removal of the cap. It's just been discussions this week, but it looks like it's going to continue to proceed.
Well, it appears right now, and things could change, that it's not a question of if the 100 charter cap will be lifted, but when. The greater detail is what is going to replace that cap. Some Senate Republicans rolled out really a sweeping charter schools bill during the week that created a new charter schools commission that would basically license and manage the applications, and immediately some some Democrats and even some representatives of the State Board of Education said that's unconstitutional because it's the state board's job, according to the Constitution, to monitor and manage the state education system. Also some concerns about some language that would give local governments some options to help pay for charters, particularly with capital expenses. And there's also some discussions about some language that would be removed that that would remove some obstacles so that perhaps more charter schools could focus on a particular socioeconomic group of people or situations, and that's raised some concerns about resegregation among some people. So that's going to get some more work. I believe it's going to go into a subcommittee.
Move over to the House side now. The big topic on Wednesday was, and plenty of discussion, 3.5 hours of discussion, was on the health care challenge that they're trying to put out there. What do you think is the reason that this is happening, and what do you think the opposition, the Democrats, are saying, this is being rushed a little bit? Do you think this is a positive thing? Because the Senate's also introduced it this week as well.
Well, it's certainly a campaign promise that the Republicans said they would do, and they already had language drawn up last year, so it was a pretty easy thing to go through. And the Republicans had tried to make it not so much about the health care legislation, but the issues of federal versus state government or constitutional questions. Democrats, of course, said this was being rushed and that this would ultimately, if it were successful and led to somehow overturning the health care bill would be devastating to a lot of people who need insurance. So it seems like the Senate's going to take a pretty strong movement on that, perhaps as early as next week, start debating that.
Gary Robertson, we always appreciate your insight with the Associated Press.
Glad to be here.
And that's our show for this week. If you missed anything or for more information throughout the session, log on to www.unctv.org/Legweek. There you'll find links to the show and our Facebook and YouTube pages and our Twitter feed. Thanks for watching.
Quality public television is made possible through the financial contributions of viewers like you, who invite you to join them in supporting UNC-TV.